Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tallman, and with me today, once again, is one of our buyer's agents, and that is Paul Linn. Welcome back to the show, Paul.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm surprised you brought me back. I don't know if our first time together, if it was a hit or not, but you brought me back.
Yeah, well, the interesting piece of that is when I had you on, I think back in like September, I think it was. I went and looked that up.
Yeah.
You were not a T&H employee. You were someone that used to be a T&H employee for like 10 years, and then you did your own thing. And then we met back up on this podcast. It led to bigger conversations. And then here you are back and a T&H employee and a buyer's agent. So I'm just curious, how is life inside T&H 2.0 for you?
It's completely different. Obviously, when I was first employee with you guys, everything was new. We were learning as we were learning to fly the plane while we were up in the air, And so now you guys are a lot more structured, organized, and my role is just it is what it is. It's buyer's agent, right? So I just help people buy and kind of go through that process, and that's where my strengths are. So it's nice to be able to just kind of work in when I'm talented at, right? So it's been a big change for sure over the last few months.
Yeah, there's this thing in property management. I'm sure it's not just property management, but as industries and companies mature, they hire more specialists instead of generalists. Because you were the epitome of a generalist when we hired you. You were our first hire. You did everything in our company. And now, when you're back, your job description's a lot smaller, right? You're doing very specific things. So, but no, it's been great having you back and talking about old times with you a little bit. But I brought you on here today, Paul, to talk about this question around what makes a good deal in Indy today. And at the end of the podcast, I want to go through and I want you to actually talk about active deals today on the market that you think are good deals, just to get that anatomy of what we're seeing today. But, we chatted a little bit before we hit record here, is buying season has started. And I think it was a couple of things. I think March 1st, we're now on the 10th or 12th or whatever day it is, but March 1st, and then also interest rates sneaking below 6%. Right. I think psychologically, those factors have opened up what I would call floodgates, because I was actually at a MIBOR meeting yesterday, Paul, and I was talking to some agents, and one of them I heard say, yeah, we've signed like 3 BACs this week. And I'm like, BACs? What in the world is a BAC? It's like an acronym I wasn't familiar with, and I kind of put it together. It stands for Buyer's Exclusive Agency Contract. And that is the contract nowadays that you have to sign to engage a realtor on the buy side. Always had to on the list side. Now we do it on the buy side. And they've been saying they signed like 2 or 3 in the last week. Well, starting yesterday, and then it went on into this morning, I think I've signed 7 for our company.
Oh, wow.
So buyers are here, right? And they're knocking down the doors again, and they're here, and they're all motivated again. And I think there's a couple different reasons for that. But so, Paul, I want to go back a little bit, maybe a lot of years, because you were a buyer's agent. That was part of your role here before you left the first time. And talk about, that was back in, I think I had it pegged as March of 2018 is what I researched and found. That's when you gave your notice that you were moving on.
Right.
Tell people back then, what a deal looked like. I'm sure prices were very different, but can you kind of model out maybe a deal or two that you were doing back then for investors?
Yeah, it seemed like there was a lot of opportunity. I felt like there were a lot more homes to pick from at that time. And I felt like, we're in a very seasonal market. So depending on when they were looking to buy, like you could sneak in and get a property under contract without all the competition. I just remember 90% of the time I wrote an offer, we were probably going to get it, right? And so most of the deals we were looking at were in what we call it here a vinyl village, like in your subdivisions. But I had a couple of them that I wrote down, but it looked like your typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch, 1,300 square feet, selling anywhere from 100 to 120,000, somewhere in that range. Sometimes you could get it 5,000 under or whatever, but it was I don't want to say it was easy, but I didn't have as much competition. Nowadays, if that home hits the market that's priced right, that shows well, it might fly off in 5 days and you're competing with a lot of first-time home buyers, right? So I do think there's a little bit more competition, but back then, yeah, it was a different market and the pricing was way different.
Yeah, so you were buying. This is 8 years ago, almost
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
right at 8 years ago. So you were buying those 3-2 vinyl villages. You said again for around 125,000.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them here that I wrote down. One was for 99,000, one for 125. Yeah, and then one of them I helped him buy in 2018. We sold it in 2024. He paid 125 for it in 2018, and then in 2024 we ended up selling it for 225.
Wow. So $100,000 in 6 years. Was there a lot of rehab at the outset, or do you remember
Um,
much about it?
well, it was tenant occupied for those years. So once that tenant moved out, it was the general probably need some painting. We had to do some exterior cleaning, but I would say maybe 8 to 10 grand to get it, rent or on the
Yeah.
market ready. And it sold pretty quickly within 30 days.
Wow, that's amazing. So, all right, let's get back into reality and talk about because you talk to a lot of first-time investors that they're, let's say maybe they're tire kickers. They're just out there kind of curious about what investing looks like in central Indiana. What are the biggest mistakes you're seeing? Maybe first time, maybe second time, maybe they're seasoned, but just mistakes investors are making when they're evaluating deals in today's market.
Yeah, so I would say, and there's nothing wrong with this, but there's some, like I meet with a lot of investors and they like to overanalyze the data, I think. They're looking for this, everything has to match this exact formula that I've created, whether they've got it online, they've got it from me, they got it from somebody else. And then they start plugging away and they realize like no deal is ever going to work. And it's because they're being very tight on everything, that's not a bad thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's not going to work if it's got to meet this exact criteria. I mean, you'd have to get every deal like 20, $30,000 under, and again, probably not going to happen. So I think having real conversations with, the property managers, the realtors, and maybe your insurance people to understand what these costs really are and figuring out like what your long-term goal is. Again, if you're looking to hold this thing 5 or 10 years, over time, these numbers will work out. It's just these first couple of years might be a little tough. So that's kind of what I see. I see a lot of people just over analyzing the data and then just never moving forward because they're stuck.
Yeah. Is there one metric that is it cash flow? I'm assuming that is like, I have to have $300 or $400 of cash flow, which used to be a thing. I remember that
Yeah.
very clearly. Is that what they're stuck on? Is it just this thing doesn't cash flow or doesn't have the cash flow expectations that bigger pockets or a friend of mine said I need to have?
Yeah, I would say cash flow is usually the biggest term that we hear. And, I try to talk to them and say, hey, look, obviously the goal would be to make some money. It would be nice to have some cash flow. If you can if you have a mortgage, if your mortgage is paid, your management fees are paid, and you have a little bit of money left over at the end of the month just for maintenance or whatever, I feel like in my eyes, that's a win. Now, again, on a spreadsheet, it may not be perfect, but it's still a pretty good opportunity to allow, someone to pay down your mortgage, pays your management fees, and now you have a property under your belt. So that's kind of the stuff that I look at. But yeah, cash flow is probably something that they get hung up on the most.
Yeah, I think cash flow is tough. I've heard Rosie in our brokerage mention that, you know, it could take a couple of years before the property flips to becoming cash flow positive. And that's just something investors are going to have to get used to because I agree with you. If you have a long-term outlook, you will almost always make money.
Yeah.
If that's your thought process, it's just getting through those lean years. And look, lean years could happen at year 10, 15, 20. I've talked about how last year, 25, was a really difficult year for Scott and me with
Hmm.
our own rentals because we had significant HVAC repairs and replacements. So it doesn't always, even if you owe nothing on them, they can still be difficult
Oh yeah.
because things break, right? They don't
Right.
last forever. So having said all that, Paul, are you still finding, I mean, you're getting stuff bought, but are you
Yeah.
finding good deals or, I think maybe the reality is the definition of good deals has changed. So,
Yeah.
so you're still finding stuff for investors, sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I know you said March 1st, it's like great now, all the buyers are out, but I will say 2 months ago when we had all the snow, that was the time to be out because nobody else was buying.
That's a
So
good
we were
point.
we were
Yeah.
able to snag up a couple properties. I'm not saying that they were slam dunks, but the market was slow. And if you're looking at comps like in January from like the last couple of months, you might underprice a home because you're trying to get it sold. But yeah, we got a deal just recently. We just closed on it yesterday. It was a 3-2 in a Vinyl Village. I think we got it for like 196, and
Mm,
we got 3,000 in closing costs paid by the seller. Now, the cool thing was the roof, AC, water heater, all 3 or 4 years old. Furnace is about 10. The only thing it needed really was the punch out, the paint and like cleanup, right? Not too much. So the great thing is my buddy of mine flipped a house right down the street, like right before we closed, and he listed it same kind of make, model, everything for 239 on a nice sunny March day, and he got it pending in like 3 days. So
nice.
I think in my eyes, and our appraisal came in even higher. So in my eyes, again, was it a slam dunk? I mean, depends on how you look at it, but I think it was a pretty good deal. Now, if that house were to list today, even a couple months later, I think that we would have gotten it at a higher price.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really smart. Actually, I don't know why I was thinking about this yesterday about how the time to buy. Well, I actually know. I remember now why I was thinking about it is it showed we were at again that MIBOR meeting, and it showed the number of properties that expired or were taken off the market, and
Hmm.
it peaked in I think it was January of this year. So we had,
Right.
and it was the highest in 8 years. It was the most data they had on that they could pull back was 8 years. So I'm like, that is the time to buy. It's like
Right.
cold out, it's nasty out, but it's like if you're sitting in California or a different state or wherever, you don't have a sense of that. It's like, wow, this home came on the market. There's some, doesn't sound like there's much competition. You're not going to compete with a lot of owner occupants, I guess, at
Correct.
that point. So
Yeah.
I guess that's a pro tip. Buy when the weather's terrible
Well,
here
that's
because that
terrible.
you could have an advantage. So
Yeah.
Paul, when an investor asks you if a property is a good deal, what first goes through your mind? I'm just curious, like, how do you think about good deals?
Well, yeah, again, it really just depends on. I always look at like the picture as a whole. Again, what is their goal? Are they looking for a 5 term long? Like, what is their goal? And number one, number two, I'm looking at the age of everything, the price, the sales comps, the rent comps. Like, I put it all together. That will help me determine if this is in my eyes a good deal, right? If it's got 20-year-old roof, 20-year-old everything, and they're wanting 10,000 over what the comps are saying, no, it's not a good
Right.
deal, right? But once we evaluate everything and kind of piece it that way, it's like, hey, look, all I have to do is paint in here, but the roof and everything else is new. Like, and the comps show that it's right, and the rent comps are good, and it covers my mortgage and my management fee. That's probably a good deal, right? So that's kind of how I look at things. Of course, cash flow would be great, but I'd look at everything as a whole. And
Yeah.
the house itself has to be in a good area and so on. So
So you really drill into big ticket items the most, which
yeah,
makes
that's true.
sense.
Yeah.
And this is probably embarrassing to even put out there, but um, I didn't know until maybe a month ago that the new seller's disclosures, you're required to put the age of your mechanicals on there now. It
Yeah.
used to be just the roof,
Yep.
but Scott and I sold one of our duplexes recently, and I had to fill out the seller's disclosures, first one I've filled out in years.
Four
And I'm
pages.
like, yeah, I'm like, wow, they want the age of the mechanical. So I had to go, look that all up. But
Hmm.
that provides, especially in your situation with how you look at properties, just so much data right at your fingertips to help you evaluate it quicker. Because instead of you going to the agent and saying, hey, can you find out how old the HVAC is? And you might get a
Hmm.
good answer or not. They're asked to disclose it and tell you how old things are. That
Right.
seems like that's very helpful and can speed up things a little bit.
It definitely can. I mean, but there are a lot of times the seller just doesn't know because they're like, I
Yeah.
don't know. And the agent's like, I don't know because they're not allowed to fill it out. So a lot of times I'm at the property getting the serial number, getting the model
Yeah.
number. ChatGPT can give you the age. I've learned how to read them so I can look at it and go, okay, hey, that's 2015 or that's whatever. But yeah, it's very simple to get that data, right? But yeah, that's the stuff I look at, and if you're buying a house that has, everything's brand new or within a couple of years, do you really need to be setting back all this money? If you're gonna, let's say your goal is to hold it for 5 years, you probably won't have to replace that roof, right? So I'm like, why am I setting back 10, 20% for a capex on something that's probably not going to go out in that 5 years? Knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
So those are the things I look at for sure.
All right, Paul. So are there certain areas around Indianapolis where deals pencil out better than others? I'm sure there are, but do you have some thoughts about, certain areas where you're seeing success?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Indianapolis is huge, right? We've got so many different neighborhoods and so on. And there are times, right, that you're going to find this, old house from the 40s that's not in great schools, but it's got a low sale price and the rents are a little bit higher that might look great on paper. But most of my deals that I work with, most of the people I'm working with, we're kind of on the outskirts in those townships, like
Yeah.
Franklin Township or like over to Avon or Brownsburg or just in those good highly rated school districts, things like that. That's where I'm seeing the most success, especially for people that are looking for just for like good quality, properties, good quality tenants, things like that. We have had some success up in Anderson because the numbers and rents are pretty good up there. Anderson's, 30 minutes or so from Indy. It's not bad up there. You're not going to get as much appreciation, but
Yeah.
the cash flow and all that is a little bit better than what you might be able to get over here in Indianapolis.
So you like staying outside of 465 then, basically?
I try. Now again, I find properties inside the loop, right? There's plenty of properties like in Wayne Township or Pine that's still inside that loop.
Right.
But I try to eliminate too much of a headache, right? If somebody's going, hey, I want this and that, and then they go and write an offer on a house again with built in 1920 on a crawl space, I can tell you like 90% of the time there's going to be some issues with the foundation or something down there that's going to be a deal killer for them. And
Yeah.
so if I can eliminate headaches and so on, then that's what I try to do. Now, every investor is different. Their threshold's different. They may say that doesn't bother me. I just want this. The cash flow is great. So it depends on what the buyer wants. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell them one way or the other. But yeah, most of my stuff I'm getting is in little neighborhoods, subdivisions, in the good school areas outside of the 465.
Should let's talk about this whole notion of turnkey deals.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because we see that. We have, there used to, I'm guessing people are still call themselves a turnkey provider. I've heard that term a lot over the years that, hey, we buy homes, fix them up, and turn them over to you turnkey, move the resident in, everything's good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I just heard so many horror stories about that. Tell us some of yours. I mean, you don't have to get into like a lot of specifics, but this whole notion of turnkey, if someone who didn't know any better says, hey, Paul, this looks like it's turnkey, I should be ready to go. Like,
Yeah.
what's your kind of response on that?
My response usually is even if they tell us it's turnkey, you're probably still going to have anywhere from $1,000 up to $4,000 or $5,000 in make ready stuff, right? Because the person that's doing the turnkey they didn't turnkey it for you to rent it out. They made it turnkey for maybe someone to buy and move into.
Hmm.
But a lot of times you go in there and there's just so many little things that they just didn't do, that we would need to have done for it to be a rental, right?
Yeah.
Could be little things like door stoppers, blinds, and so on. And sometimes they, forget little things, right? So there's always going to be something that you're going to have to go in there and make right. And then your inspection report, once you have it inspected, will tell you kind of really what we're looking at, what they missed, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be weary of it, but the term turnkey, I can guarantee there's going to be something that we will still have to go in there and do to get it rent ready.
Yeah. I've said this before. I think it's true, and you hit on it a little bit. I think properties need to be in better shape to rent than they do to sell
Oh yeah,
to an owner occupant. Because if you're an owner occupant, you can deal with certain things if you want. You can say, yeah, this handrail's missing. I'm not too worried about that. I have good balance. This appliance is not the best. It doesn't work the greatest. We'll upgrade eventually. Those are things that you're going to take care of when you rent. So it is when I tell people that don't, that maybe not have thought about it, they push back a little bit. But I think it's true generally is that think of it like a hotel room. It needs to be that clean. It needs to be everything working.
yeah,
Um, it needs to be attractive. It says, I'm going to come in here as a renter. I don't intend to invest money in this property at all. So I don't want to deal with that or that or that, but
yeah.
a homeowner might. So I think that's how the mindset needs to be when you go to prep a property like this. It needs to be in extremely good shape.
Oh yeah, and the last thing you want is a tenant to move in and then give you a grocery list of stuff that you got to come back in and fix
Yep.
after they move in, but that you could have handled ahead of time, right? Now they're still going to find some stuff just because they're living there and they're the ones taking the showers and running the dishwasher and doing the things that we can't do. But I do think that, yeah, it needs to be in a lot better shape than what you do when you sell it. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's kind of do an exercise here where you have a new buyer lead set up and you have your initial meeting, and they come to you and they go, Paul, I've researched Indianapolis. I've read a lot about it, and here are my goals. I want to, buy something with at least 20% equity. I'd like to have cash flow $400 to $500 a month. Tell me how you coach them through that. Like, I'm curious, like, without just saying, hey, you're ridiculous and good knowing you, or I mean, just talk through that conversation with someone that I'm sure you've had a lot that has
Oh, yeah.
unreasonable expectations. How do you
Well,
reset them?
yeah, so I usually tell them, hey, first of all, if you find that property, let me know because I'm interested too, right? Like, and yeah. So again, there might be one or two out there, but usually we just try to dial them back in and just kind of explain to them where we are at. And it's not just Indianapolis; it's everywhere, right? Where we're at in the market, and just kind of why Indianapolis is a good area to invest. And we talk about the appreciation, we talk about the steady job growth, and we talk about the rents being steady. I'm in the years that I've been here in the industry, I've never really seen the rents go down. They kind
Right.
of fluctuate with seasons, but that's about it.
Sure.
But yeah, once we start talking through all that, they kind of understand. Then it's like, okay, what is more realistic? And then we start talking. Here's kind of some deals that we've got. Here's some scenarios, and obviously, if they can make it work, great. Most people can. I mean, I still have a lot of people coming to me from all over the place that don't just invest here in Indy. They invest in other markets and they keep coming back. And there's a reason why
Hmm.
they keep coming back, right? Because I think our numbers here are a little bit better than what they're able to get elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you just gotta. It's all about setting expectations up front, and then once I learn what they're looking for, we start setting up the searches and start analyzing properties before I actually go out and look at these homes. Right? We want to make sure they're a good fit first. But yeah, that's kind of what we do. We just kind of bring it back to reality. And if it's a good fit, great. If they're not willing to work with us or they can't make the numbers work, then there's nothing else
Yeah.
I can do at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's better to be disappointed early than be disappointed, because when you buy something, you're putting a commitment into it.
Right.
It's not like you bought a stock and can sell it the next day. Real estate is not nearly as liquid as other things. So if they're frustrated at the very beginning, it's probably best they exit, maybe take some time to think through it. And if they want to, come back and rehab the conversation. But so let's get into, I've totally buried the lead, and I guess I said I would, but let's get into what makes a good deal in Indianapolis today. Won't you talk through some? These likely won't be available when this podcast comes out, but I'm just curious, like, without giving away maybe street numbers, if you can just kind of say, these are three or two or however many you have deals that I think work, and tell me why.
So yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of properties I've been looking at. I went out and did a few videos for some people on the south side over here in Franklin Township. I keep coming back to that because I live in this area. But anytime I can find something, that's built, 1995, which sounds crazy. It's like 30 years old now, but and above, three-bedroom, two-bath ranch. And the reason why I always go back to that ranch is because it's, especially for your first investment, that's an easy one to maintain, right? We're not buying a 3,000 square foot home that's going to take $20,000 in paint and flooring, right?
Yeah.
Three-bedroom, two-bath ranch, anywhere from 200 to 225. I think this one was listed at 224.9, and it's been sitting on the market a little bit. And I think if we could get that price down a little bit, it would make a pretty good deal. The rent on something like that is like $1,700 a month. And those types of properties, especially going, we're in March while this is recorded. So we're going into a good rental season. That would be a good property to pick up.
Yeah, that seems, look, you're not going to cash flow much, if anything, unless you put a bunch down on that one at all,
Right.
probably. But I do think, I love the fact that that property has so many exit strategies that you can
Oh, yeah.
use, because it's a brick ranch. You mentioned it's highly desirable for a lot of different people. It's safe. It's almost certain to continue to appreciate.
Correct.
And like you mentioned, the maintenance, you're going to have some clearly, but it's not like you bought a frame house that opens up all kinds of other exposures with wood siding and things like that. So That seems
Yeah,
like a really safe long-term play that could pay off big down the road. So I like that one.
definitely. And that's one that's in an HOA, but we manage several in the community. I actually own one in the community, so I know that neighborhood pretty well. But yeah, that one's not too bad. It's been on the market a little while, and again, I think they're slightly overpriced, only based on when I walked it a couple weeks ago when there was snow on the ground.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's a good one. And this one here, I'm going to be a little biased, but I just listed a property on the northwest side, in non-HOA, but it is in Wayne Township, near Eagle Creek. It's a turnkey, right? Property that was just renovated, and that's a two-bedroom, two-bath, about 1,300 square feet, a new HVAC, new water heater. That one I listed for 229, and again, rents are going to be in that same range. I know it's only two bedrooms, but it's a large two-bedroom property, and no HOA is a big for tenants and even for owners. It's nice to know that you don't have to worry about any restrictions or anything like that. So
Yeah.
that's a good one as well.
Okay. Have you looked at, you talked about Anderson.
Mhm.
Do you spend much time in Kokomo? I mean, what other, do you have any other deals like some representative properties for maybe outside of 465, or those were outside of 465, but maybe in the broader central Indiana area? Do you look at much of that stuff?
It depends on the buyer. A lot of the people that I work with are specifically looking in Indianapolis. And
Yeah.
even if I have that conversation with them, they come, like I've met with a guy the other day with like the eight properties, came in town specifically because he wanted Indianapolis. And I don't do a ton on the outside of here, but I did recently close a transaction up in Anderson. It was a duplex that we already managed, and I think we sold that one, or they purchased that one for like 180 or 179 or something like
Wow.
that. And the rents were like, I think they were $1,000 a piece. So like it was a side by side duplex, nice brick, nicely done. That was a really good deal. And the cash
Yeah.
flow was there, and it was a great opportunity to get off market. So it's definitely, I will go out and get those properties if that's what they're looking for. But a lot
Yeah.
of people I work with want to, they really like Indianapolis for specific reasons. So,
So I think I remember that deal. That's a property we managed before. I think we sold it for our investor, and I guess you had a buyer that bought it. And I've never been in those properties, but you mentioned they're brick duplexes,
oh yeah,
and
they
they
were
rent for about
great.
$1,000 a side. And what was the purchase price?
I think we were at like 179 as
Wow,
is.
that's
And
a
they were built set up as a duplex. It wasn't like it was a conversion or something like
right.
that. And you have the garage in the middle, so you got both garages, then the duplex. So
Mm,
to me, if you're like a tenant, you're not sharing walls with each other. It was a really great setup. I really like that property.
yeah, that seems like my guess is most investors would want to buy something like that.
Oh
The
yeah,
only downside, like you mentioned, and I'm not saying it's a downside, it's just a reality. It's in Anderson, it's not in Indianapolis.
correct.
So the appreciation on that duplex, like you mentioned earlier, probably isn't going to be there. But you've got the potential, and I'll stress the word potential,
Hmm.
for reasonable cash flow in some years.
Yeah.
That just doesn't exist in a lot of deals that we analyze day to day. So
Yeah, the cash flow was good. I mean, we ran it in a couple different ways. I think he paid cash for it, and the return on that was pretty good.
yeah. So as we wrap this up, Paul, what's the one piece of advice that you could give investors who are trying to find a deal in today's market? Just curious as we end this.
I would just say I took a few notes here, but I would say obviously be patient. Number one, don't just jump into the first thing you see, especially if you're new. You're anxious. You just want to get something under contract, but at the same time, don't overthink this. Right? You need to like lean heavy on a realtor that you can trust because my job obviously, yeah, I get paid when you buy a house, but my whole goal out of this entire thing is not just to sell you a property. My whole goal is to make sure that you're buying something that fits what you're looking for, that you're informed, that you're making the right decisions. Like my goal would be to tell you, hey, this property stinks over, hey, this is a great deal, right? But
Right.
yeah, just kind of be patient, lean heavy on the people you can trust, and just once you get going, and maybe it takes one or two deals that you lose, you write an offer, you don't get it accepted, you'll start learning kind of what the market's doing, and maybe I need to be a little bit stronger on my offer, or maybe I need to do this. But I think just kind of leaning into some guidance and finding someone you can trust and just being patient, really. That's what it all boils down to. Some people
Yeah.
get discouraged and then they want to quit after a month or two, and it's like it may take you a couple months to get that first one under your belt, but once you do it, you'll realize like, man, I did overthink that. It wasn't that difficult, right?
When I look at our properties today, and I'm sure that we had all kinds of consternation about buying them, maybe over $1,000 or $1,500.
Right.
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 And now look, I'm removed from it. I'm 25 years removed from buying and call 20 years away from buying most of our rentals. So I have that luxury of hindsight. And a lot of people, don't have that. I get it. If you have to overpay to get a little bit to get a really nice property, I say do it. Do it every day if you can. Because if your goal is long term, which I think that's probably the biggest takeaway here is if you're looking for short-term benefit on real estate today,
Right.
you're going to struggle.
Yep.
You can flip, and that's probably a whole different podcast. But if you're looking to say right off the bat, I want to start earning this cash flow, this isn't the thing you should be buying, but it's more of a long-term prospect for a lot of our clients. And I think that's how money is made in real estate. It's made slowly. But to me, that's the takeaway here is that there's still deals out there if you have the right mindset and the ability to, understand that it's not going to cash flow from day one in most cases. So
Right. I say the same thing all the time. Like people get hung up over $1,000 or a $1,500 credit or something. And I'm just like sitting here thinking, and I'm not going to act like $1,000 isn't, a lot of money or something,
right.
but 5, 10, 15 years from now, are you going to remember? Are you going to be sitting like on vacation somewhere going, man, I wish I would never have taken that that $1,500 credit. I wish I would have gotten that. I don't think you're going to even remember it at that point, right?
That's right.
So
Absolutely. I don't.
Yeah. I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope you're not thinking that way because otherwise that's a problem.
Yeah.
But anyways, those little things, that's what I mean. Don't get hung up on those little details and just try to find something good today that's going to work long term for you. So
yeah. Well, Paul, thanks for coming on here. Appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, always.
Yeah. We hope everyone has picked up some information that will help them in their investing. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, and please stay invested in your investment.